right. Hey, everybody. Happy Make Your Move Monday. This is Latrice McFadden coming to you live all the way from Durham, North Carolina, with my special guest, Phionne Weir, right?
Yep, you
Yeah,
got
okay. I was about to change the pronunciation for some reason. So, coming to us all the way from Raleigh, right? I didn't ask you where you were today. Are
it.
you in
Wendell.
Wendell? Okay. She's working with me on my very first time being on the StreamYard platform. So hopefully all is going well and you all are seeing this live. And if not, then we will uh, get it live afterwards. So my guest last week was like, you are missing out on so much by not being on other platforms. And I was like, I have been looking at this technology for a long time and had not done it. So I committed to doing this week. So hopefully it's all recording and live, and you'll be seeing us live now. So, but anyway, excited today. I met Phionne. Gosh, has it been 2 years? We were both panelists on the Grab the Key
Yeah, it was
seminar.
about 2 years ago.
Time is just flying. I tell you, waits for no one. So, and ever since then, we've kind of kept in touch, and she's been on my page. I've been on her page, and I was really, really excited and impressed by her story. So I invited her to come on and share a bit about being a real estate investor, starting out at a very young age, and sticking to it. And then when we met that day, she invited us to go to one of her properties because she was talking a lot about the ADUs. And so wanted to come on and talk about that because today you have got to have multiple streams of income.
Absolutely.
It's just
No
no
longer.
other way about it. So I thought that was a great opportunity and a great addition. So Phionne, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and let's talk investment, real estate investing.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Phionne Weir. I am a Raleigh native. I currently am a real estate investor. I started investing in 2000. I believe it's been exactly 25 years since I started investing. And I also own a real estate brokerage called Quality Housing Solutions, Inc. So that's pretty much what I am doing now is investing. I have a portfolio of properties that I manage for myself. And I love just helping other people and encouraging other people to get into long-term buy and hold investing.
Okay. And so do you manage for other people? I know you said you have a portfolio that you manage for yourself, but do you manage for other people too?
No, I used to manage for other people, but I actually offer investor services that services my investors now through my leasing services. I have a strategic leasing services to attract the best qualified tenants for their properties. And once we do the work on the front end, they really don't need me on a monthly basis. And if so, I offer consultations if they need help writing letters or tenant communications, or they're experiencing some sort of issue with their tenants, they reach out to me. But on an every month basis, billing them 8 to 10%, I found that they get to keep more of their cash flow if I do the lease up for them. I also offer inspection services to them to make sure that the tenants are taking care of the property, as well as lease renewals and rental analysis whenever it's time to renew the lease to make sure that they're getting market rate for their property. So I offer sort of ad hoc services to my investors now instead of the full-fledged property management services that I used to. It nets them more as far as cash flow at the end of the day. I have people who I've done my investor services for like 5 to 10 years, and the tenants tend to stay. The retention is great with the investors that I offer. So if you look at it on an annual basis, you're saving thousands of dollars on property management fees. Sometimes it's necessary to have a property manager, but sometimes it's not. I let them gauge, especially that first year. I let them know, hey, these are the services that you can start with. If you need a property manager and you feel like you want a property manager still, I can refer you to a property manager, but likely they never come back for that service because they like keeping that money and just using me on an ad hoc basis. I have experience in property management from luxury properties to just the regular everyday properties. I worked tax credit, Section 8, conventional, student housing, elderly housing, you name it, I've done it.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I have a vast amount of experience that they can pull from when they need it. So
Mhm.
it's like I'm a mentor there for them whenever they need me, but I'm not charging them on an every month basis.
Okay. And you said they don't typically come back to you, because when I think about
They never
property
come back to
management,
me
I'm
and
like,
say, "Oh, I need a property manager." Uh,
really? So
no,
your system outlines it for them, and it's worked well, and people haven't been like, because
absolutely.
I'm just like, I do
It's
not want to
worked
do
well because a huge part of the failure rate with investors is their lack of knowledge and they don't have anyone to reach out to when they have a problem or concern.
that. Hmm.
I'm there to discuss it through them, create a strategy so that they can get the situation taken care of. And a lot of times they think that the property manager is doing things that they actually are not doing. A lot of my out of state investors say they're in California. They think that the property manager is riding by the property. They think that the property manager is going in there and investing every quarter or even every 6 months or every year. And they're not. A lot of them aren't. Some of them
Right.
are, but a lot of them aren't.
Hmm.
I've had disasters where the investor comes to me after having a property manager that they thought was taking care of the property. And when they came back to visit the property, it was destroyed, holes in the walls, it was infested with roaches, all these things that could have been prevented with, say, just doing the lease up service, doing the screening on the front end, and doing the inspection services quarterly, annually, or semi-annually, just to get in there and see what's going on. I provide pictures and videos so that they can kind of walk with me through the house to see what's going on with their investment. That is especially helpful for people who are out of town or
Hmm.
out of the country, even to see what's going on with their property. It's really important that they know and not just taking property manager's word for it that everything is okay. Because sometimes the person could be paying on time, but it's destroying the property at the same time.
That is so true. Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday, and that exact situation happened to them, and they were like, we were paying a property manager, and they had just recently renovated before, and came back, and people had written on the walls and just tore everything up. So yeah,
And
so
it's
that
so
is good.
costly. It is so
Yes.
costly. And as an investor myself, I can sympathize with the investor, and I know how expensive it is to turn a property. And when I say turn a property, I'm talking about going in and fix it up between tenants.
Hmm.
It can cost, right now, the estimate is probably about, it depends on how large the property is, but for my properties, it costs about 8 to 10,000 to get a property back in rent ready condition after a tenant has moved out after like 5 years. Because no matter how well they took care of the property, you still got to go in there and paint it. You still have to, make sure that the flooring is good. And I put a lot of work into my property so that they are as good as I can give my tenants. I don't ever want to give a product like a property over to a tenant that I wouldn't want to live in. So I make
Right.
sure that it's clean, they have
Hmm.
appliances that work,
Hmm.
that's kind of, up to date. And is if I give them the property like that and I have screened them well, they tend to take care of the property.
Okay. And so you said, like, with you will do the lease up product, and then you will do the inspections, and then what happens if there's a repair? They just call the owner themselves
Yes.
to
So
do
if there's a repair that's needed at the property, the owner has an opportunity to get their own contractors if they wish. My husband also owns Quality Home Maintenance, so it's very convenient if they need maintenance services. He'll be happy to go over there and give them an estimate on how much it is to repair it. And they can choose whether to use him or use their own contractors. That's another thing with property management companies. Sometimes there's an upcharge if they use the property manager to do maintenance. They may add an upcharge to the material and the labor, and it could increase a cost that's already expensive. So
it?
if they have a maintenance issue, they can get their own contractor, or they can always reach out to me like they do for anything else and ask, Phionne, do you have someone for this, that, and the other? If my husband doesn't do it, he has a crew of people that he's worked with that are reasonable and they are dependable. So And it's very hard to find contractors these days. So I find that the investors that I work with are very grateful that my husband offers this service and that he is available to them, because finding a contractor in your own town is difficult. But if they're out of town investors, it is extremely difficult for them to find contractors that are willing to come, give estimates, do the work, and do what they say they're going to do. So that's how they would handle those issues. He tends to do most of their turns. So between tenants, he'll go in and do their painting, flooring, the repairs that needs to be done between tenants, but also the regular preventative maintenance that we suggest as well. Making sure the smoke detectors work, making sure that the, carbon monoxide detectors are installed, the things like that, the filters are changed. Those are things that seem small, but over time, they are very important. Not changing filters for 3 or 4 years, you'll be needing a new system probably. So he does things like that as well. But the big things as well as the small things, they tend to call me and ask me for a referral if they don't have their own crew.
Okay. All right. So I got to get his information too. So you have been doing investing for, like you said, 25 years. How did you get started? And then I know that you really focus on long term, not necessarily like the short term, like fix and flips and the Airbnb and the shorter things.
Yeah, I stay away from those things.
Okay.
I know me and I know my personality. And so let me back up with how I started, and I can just tell you why I don't do the short term. Anyhow, I started back in 97. So in 97 is when I had my son. I was a young parent. I started, I was 19 when I had him, and this baby never slept ever at night. So how I got interested in real estate is actually the non-traditional way. It was through an infomercial that used to come on during the late 90s. It was a guy named Carlton Sheets. This was before real estate investing was even popular at all. And I don't even know how many other people used to look at those infomercials because they came on so late at night. But night after night, I saw this guy on the infomercial, and I kind of got used to seeing him. I was interested in what he was saying, and he piqued my interest. Because at the time I was working for minimum wage. I was working at Sam's Club, and I hated that job. I hated the job, and it was one thing that I said back then: I'm not going to have low pay, hate the job, and not have advancement opportunity. I mean, pick a struggle. You can't have all three. So at that time, I was already in the mindset that no, I needed a better life for me and my son. So listening to Carlton Sheets was the first time I was introduced to real estate investing and the opportunity to earn passive income, meaning you didn't exchange your time for money. And so at the time, his program was like $200, which in the late 90s, that was a lot of money, especially for me as a young person. So I talked to my older sister, and she ended up buying the program and allowing me to read the book. And I read it cover to cover, back and forth. I read the book, highlighted everything. You would have thought it was my book, but it was actually hers. I was borrowing it. But I had so many highlights and notes and everything, and I finished it. And then I said, okay, there's a problem. I still don't have any money. So at the end of the day, that was the issue. So I just continued to keep studying and reading. And the next book that came out, there was a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It came out around the exact same time. Around 98 is when I got a hold of that book, and I read that. And I was really inspired after reading that to get into real estate investing. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. So to make a long story short, I was getting the information that I needed to invest, but I still didn't have the money. But like the saying goes, luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. And luckily, the opportunity came for me to implement one of the strategies that I learned through the Carlton Sheets book. One day, when I was at my grandfather's house, I was living with him with my son. My grandfather sat on the porch every day. One day, my uncle came by, and he was talking to my grandfather, and I wasn't really listening. And I heard my uncle say he was ready to liquidate some assets, and he was going to start with a duplex that he had. So at that time, my ears perked up because I was like, wait a minute, duplex. I heard that during the Carlton Sheets program. He said to look for a 1 to 4 family dwelling, preferably a duplex, triplex, or a quad. And so, I kind of I wasn't eavesdropping, but I was kind of started listening to the conversation.
Look, you're hustling.
Yeah, I'm listening. And he was telling me that he wanted to sell a duplex that was not far from our house. And I turned around and I said, do you mind if I take a look at the duplex? And he's looking at me like, you're only like 21 years old. What do you know about buying a duplex? He hesitantly was like, okay, let's go. Let's take a look at it. So we looked at it, and honestly, it was nothing to write home about. It was in the hood, honestly. It was not the greatest property, but I remember the strategy that I learned through the Carlton Sheets book. He said you didn't have to stay there forever. You could stay there for like 2 years, and then you could move on to the next property. So I made him an offer of like $50,000, which was about okay back then, but it was still cheap. It was a duplex. I ended up living on one side and renting out the other. My whole mortgage payment was like $400 for the whole building.
Wow.
And so I rented out one side.
Good old days.
Yeah. So I rented out the other side for $650, and I was living there for the mortgage payment was about $400 a month. So I was making a profit, and I was pretty happy because I was out on my own. I had my own place, and I had my first tenant. And so after that, I got into property management. I started working as a leasing consultant. And after being there 2 years, I was able to move on site for free. So then I had both units that I could rent for $650 each. And so I wasn't making much at the property, but I found that my passive income was almost as much as I was making working.
Right.
Active income. And so at the time I said, this is, I like this. I like this. This is an option that I didn't even know existed. So I was able to, at that time I said, I have to continue to get properties. I don't care how slow I have to go. I'm going to start buying a property every year, every other year, 2 properties here, there, until I can, my passive income outpaces my working income. And so that's what I did. So that was my start into real estate and how I got introduced into it and how I got my first property in real estate, and how, it affected me and it helped me to understand that life was not always going to have to be a struggle.
I love that. Look, I needed my son to have been born a few years earlier because he didn't sleep. He was born in 2001, and I was watching the infomercials, but I was just spending random money on stuff because I'm up in the middle of the night. So, but I do remember Carlton Sheets being a very, popular session or tool back in that time. So that's exciting and excellent. I'm excited to hear that story. And I think there's opportunities for youth even today, even though you don't have a Carlton Sheets, but to even hear that story and implement it and, let that play a part in your life. So you said that you were going to tell us why you knew that you didn't want to do short term and why you've done the long term over the years. So talk a little bit about that, because you're right. You have to know yourself.
Yes. So the long-term rentals, first I had I had a lot of experience in property management, working with multifamily, working with different types of properties. And then I started to get my own portfolio together. The next property after the duplex was a live-in flip, which means I bought a property for like $70,000. It was habitable, but it needed work done to it, but I didn't have the money to do it all at once. So I lived in the property while I was fixing it up. And then after I lived there a couple of years, I moved on to the next one. So now they call it house hacking, but back then there wasn't a name for it. But as I started to build a portfolio, I realized that long-term buy and hold investing, it was pretty passive. It was, if you did the screening on the front end, you take care of your tenants, you make sure that you're responsive to their maintenance needs, you make sure your bookkeeping and your taxes are in order, those types of things. As long as those types of things are done, it's not anything that you really have to do on a day-to-day basis. So that was attractive to me. Way later came the option to do short-term rentals and midterm rentals, and it just never attracted me because I'm thinking if I don't want another job for myself, okay? Because short-term rentals, you might have somebody calling you every day of their visit saying, I need new towels, I need this, I need that, this the microwave is broke, or listen, I I empathize with you, but that is not the type of investment that I want. It's too hands-on, is more active than I wish to be. Everybody has their own investment strategy, their own investment story, their own goals. But at this point, my goal is freedom. My goal is having the lifestyle that I want, and not being tied to a job, and certainly not a short-term property where somebody's calling me, all the time. Not saying that every short-term property is like that, but it's more work than long-term property. It's more money, yes. But it's also more work. So it just depends on what kind of lifestyle you want. There are people that are out there that could assist with short-term rentals, like co-hosts and things like that. But it's just not my flow and where I want to go. And there's also a probability, or not a probability, but there's also a small chance that the city council may step in and say they don't want short-term rentals in the area anymore. If you went out and bought all types of stuff for the property, furniture and appliances, all this type of things for the property, and then the city council can come and say, we don't want them in our city. Or you could have an HOA to come in and say, we only will allow 10% to go to short-term rentals. Or the homeowner association can say they don't want any short-term rentals in the property. I've seen condos say that they have to approve applicants now. So it's so new to some. It's not new, but there's so many nuances with the short-term rentals that I just find it not appealing to me. So that's why I chose to just stick with long-term rental, do what I know works. And I've been able to benefit from the appreciation of the properties that I bought back in the early 2000s. The appreciation has been awesome. And also the cash flow has been great too. It's allowed me to kind of what I call backstroke myself out of real estate brokerage. I find a lot of times that my fellow real estate professionals, we have opportunities to invest and we see opportunities to invest, but a lot of times we don't invest, and I don't understand that. We have to have a retirement strategy too. We have to eventually say, one day I'm going to be too old, too sick, too something to get out there and start showing houses. And
calling and hoping.
Yeah. But we have to have a strategy. And so whenever I come upon properties that I see are a good investment, I evaluate them and see if they match my buy box. And if they do, I'm buying. I go ahead and buy it. But I'm not in a rush. I only say buy one property or two properties. I don't buy a whole bunch. For me, it's not about the number of doors. It's about the investment itself. Is the area appreciating? Is there population growth? What is the crime rate around there? What is the school system like? Do the numbers work? It's not an emotional decision. For me, I have a very, very strict criteria as far as what I buy and when I buy. I'm not in a rush to buy 100 doors. I 100 doors, but sometimes they're not cash flowing a lot at all. Off of 100 doors. So I am very strategic. I stick with my investment strategy and move accordingly. So
do you find that you still implement some of the strategies that you learned from Carlton Sheets, or have you come up with?
Yeah, I do, because there was some outlandish stuff in his book, but there were some things, and that's why I had to read the whole thing back and forth, cover to cover, because even though I didn't have the money at the time when I was studying, I did know that when an opportunity presented itself, I would at least have the knowledge of how to take advantage of the strategies that he mentioned. So going back to the book and some of the strategies that were in the book, I mean, these are old school strategies, but they still work, because 1 to 4 family dwellings, you can still get that with FHA loans. And there are lots of different products that you can do. One issue that I had when I started is the down payment. If the 20% down, if I wanted to have an investment property, if you are occupying one of the units, which I was, it wasn't a 20% down. As a matter of fact, there was a down payment assistance program. So I, with the mortgage as well as down payment assistance program, I was able to get in for just the closing costs. And those programs still exist today. You know, you can still do the exact same strategies that I did 20 years ago, 25 years ago today. You know, even with programs like NACA is a very difficult program to get through. I've taken several clients through it, but they still will allow you to purchase 1 to 4 family dwellings. They pay for down payment, closing costs, and they offer an interest rate that is lower than the national average. It is not an easy program to get through. I've taken clients through it, but it's well worth it if you have a long-term outlook and a long-term strategy. They also don't have a minimum credit score. It's a character-based loan. So you can get it without a 700 or 680 or whatever your credit score is based on, other criteria. But programs like that still exist. And also the other strategy that I use on the second property that I purchased was the live-in flip, which was also discussed in the book. Now there are so many more resources. Back then we barely had the internet. We had dial-up service. So so right now you don't have to go to a coffee sheet. There's bigger pockets, there's books, there's podcasts, there are YouTube channels. There's so many resources for people that there's just no reason not to at least get the knowledge.
Right.
If you don't have the money, still get the knowledge. The money will come, the opportunity will come. But if you're not prepared mentally to take advantage of it, you won't ever act. So I just encourage people to know that you can invest, even if you don't have a whole lot of money. If you have the will and the knowledge, and you have different strategies that can be used, you can implement that those strategies. So the first house, the second house was pretty much a house hacking strategy. And after I moved out of there, I assist my sister. She purchased her first house, and we did a house hacking strategy as well. I moved out of where I was living and moved in with her and paid her. So if you just have a single family house, you can still do the house hacking strategy, because she had a 3-bedroom. It was only one person. She was just taking care of one. And so I rented from her for me and my son. So helped her for a couple of years until I found the next property. But it's so many different ways that can be done if you don't have any money. You don't have to always jump in and buy a multifamily. I hear a lot of gurus saying, oh, invest in the multifamily as your first property. You don't have to. You don't have to. There are so many different options. So those are just a few ways that I started my portfolio.
Like, you must have been in my ear, because I was talking to a client earlier today about NACA and saying basically the same thing that you were, that it is a phenomenal program, but you do have to have the patience of Job to make it happen. But it is a great program and a great opportunity. And you don't even have to be a first-time home buyer with that program. So there's a lot of benefits. So you want to stay on it. Like you said, get the education and get prepared. It is definitely a great opportunity. So a couple of things you said, talking about screening and taking care of your tenants, because a lot of times you talked about some of the nightmare stories. What do you look for when you are screening a long-term tenant? And then what do you mean when you say treat them well?
So when you're screening a long-term tenant, there's a lot of things to look for. Number one, you want to make sure that they can afford it. A lot of people are very upset that landlords require 3 times the monthly rent as far as the income criteria. Well, that's gross. If you're making if the property is $1,000 and you make $3,000, you're not bringing home $3,000, and we know that. And when we look at your credit and see that you have all kinds of debt, if you make $2,000 gross, say for example, if I made the criteria 2 times the monthly rent, 2,000 gross is probably maybe 1,700 net.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a car payment, car insurance, daycare for 2 kids. And then and I've experienced this because when I first started, remember I was young. I was only 21 when I first bought my first property. So I made all the mistakes. I told them, oh yeah, you can move in if you only make 2 times the rent. Yeah, and that person stopped paying after a couple months because they were out of money or they paid late. So there are that 3 times the monthly rent is a very safe place for the landlord as well as the tenant, because they think that they can pay, but once they actually move in and then all those other expenses start coming in, they didn't account for. It does not work. The numbers don't work. So it's a protection for the landlord as well as for the tenant. As well, and then you pull the credit. Credit is important as well. I'm more lenient than most landlords are as far as the credit is concerned, but especially in this economy, you have to take that into consideration as well. There are a lot of people who are struggling in this economy. So, but the credit is the only, you don't know the person personally. So all you know is what's on paper and how they paid their other creditors. Because as a landlord, you are a creditor as well.
Right.
So if you see that they didn't pay anybody,
Right.
You think you're the exception? No,
Right.
I never be the exception to the rule. A lot of people will try to convince you, oh yeah, I didn't pay my last landlord because of yada yada, but I will pay you. No.
Right.
This is an investment. And when you put it like, I was talking to someone one time and they were saying, well, my credit score is like a 520, but I deserve it. And I understand that. And I understand that, but this is an investment. These investment properties could cost $200,000 or more. And I asked them, I said, well, your car's out there, so whatever kind of car it was probably about $25,000. What would be your criteria if I were to ask to, or somebody off the street were to come and ask you to drive your car? Would you have a strict criteria for that $25,000 investment or a lenient criteria? Which one? Because
analogy.
Yeah, so this is a great investment for me. So I have to make sure that the person moves in is going to take care of it, as well as calling their previous landlords to see if they took care of the property. A lot of times you will find out a lot by calling their previous landlord and see if there were, if they got their deposit back. If they didn't get their deposit back, what was wrong? And you find out, oh, they, kicked holes in the walls. They destroyed the property. They ripped the sink out the wall. They, the carpet was filthy. All these things that, you can find out just by doing a little bit of research and screening for the tenant. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to maintain the value of your asset. I do want to give people opportunities to rent, and that is why I do what I do. But I'm not it is a business for me. It is not a hobby. It is not a nonprofit. It is a business, and I want to help the people who need the help, want the help, and are deserving of the help. I'm not out here renting to just anybody. So I think one of the main struggles as a young landlord starting off, especially a young woman, minority landlord starting off, is that people just tend to run all over you. But once you establish, this is my business, I'm about business, I want to help you, but help me help you. We have to work together. So I take care of my tenants. Once I do approve them, they move in. If they call, we address whatever. First of all, make sure that the property is in pristine condition when they move in. That's the first thing. Make sure they do a move-in inspection so that they can say if anything is wrong, these are the things that were wrong when I moved in. I make sure of that. Take video and pictures of the property in the condition it was when they moved in. And when I do the annual inspection, if there's something that was there, a damage that was to the property that's there that wasn't there, I'll go ahead and let them know, yeah, this hole in the wall right here, you need to be paying this. You need to pay for this hole in the wall for 30 days. I don't wait to the end of the tenancy to try to collect, because a lot of times that security deposit is not going to cover whatever the problem was. So we address and we let them know you can make payment plans on it, but you will be taking care of this damage, that has been done. And I find that once they know that, they take very good care of the property. But other than that, if the inspection goes by, there's nothing wrong, I'll leave them alone. I want them to feel like that's their home.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in there and do my inspection, send them the list of whatever's wrong. They fix it or pay for it to get fixed, and then we move on from there. But I take care of them, they take care of me, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and they love the relationship, and that's why they stay.
Right. I like that because I don't think I've heard anybody else say that they, during the inspection, that they give them the option to go ahead and fix it or let them know that they're going to have to pay for it. So I think that's a good, like you said, treat people how you want to be treated, and
Right.
then you can set that boundary. And you mentioned, and I was going to ask you about this, especially when you were talking about the duplex, like, was there a struggle with, did you let your tenant know that you owned the property, and how did that work?
Absolutely. Some people don't. I believe in being honest.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just say that they're the property manager, or they're working on behalf of the owner or something like. No, I'm the owner of the property. This is what I expect. We read over the lease. You understand the lease. I understand my part of the lease. You understand your part of the lease. If you have any problems, you come to me. We deal with those things directly.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like being honest from the very beginning sets the tone. I want them to be honest with me, so I'm honest with them. If they one day, if I say, for example, I told them I was just the property manager, and they find out one day I was the owner, I feel like that would be some trust that was broken that didn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, it's public record sometimes who the owner is. So I wouldn't do that. But some people do, and I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying that's not something that I do.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, when you, maybe do you have an example of like somebody, how they tried to try you because you were a woman or a black woman, and they were like, oh, she's I can do this.
Yeah, I have lots of stories. I have stories for days, as a matter of fact. But I forgot. I have so many stories. One story in particular I could just tell you about, when I was I had moved out of the duplex and I was renting both sides out.
Mm-hmm.
I had a girl move in, and back then I was taking a Section 8 voucher for one of the sides of the properties, and I moved her and her two daughters in. And when I went to do the inspection, it was not only her and her two daughters, there was mattresses everywhere. It was, I said, who, what, how? What is going on here? She had moved her friend in there who had 5 kids, and the girl was pregnant again. She had moved all of them into the property, and I said, absolutely not. Listen here, you can deal with this, or I can call your caseworker.
Right.
How you want to play this? How do you want to do this? Because this has to be taken care of immediately. We have to do something now. Because
yeah, right now.
And this was like months after she moved in. And I said, how would you think that this is okay? It was only it was only a 2-bedroom. And so you have to have your boundaries, and you have to let the person know that this is not going to fly. I know you think that it would, but this is not going to work. Not with this landlord. You probably and a lot of times they have been they have done this with previous landlords and gotten away with it. So sometimes they're not used to people having boundaries and executing, those boundaries and that they put in place. So that was just one example. But there have also been issues where people have pets and they're not supposed to have pets. They're not supposed to be smoking, but they end up smoking weed and everything else in the house. So you have issues every now and then where people will test you and try you, especially now. Like recently, probably within the last 5 years since COVID, and I have seen an increase in applications that have false information. There's a lot of theft, a lot of fraud, a lot of social security numbers that are not real. There are a lot of saying that their mother or aunts or whoever is the landlord, and that's not true. There are a lot of things on applications that are even false, but the experience that I have, I can kind of point those out. But people who just started, Yeah, you can get burned by approving someone and not doing a deep dive into that application. It looks good, but there's something weird with it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do a deep dive into the screening. And I believe that's where my value comes in, because I not only just look at the surface level, I dig that person is actually.
Yeah, so yeah, I was going to ask you about like that fraud and dealing with that situation. So I'm sure that's part of your proprietary information that you will offer for your services. But I know that you can be super slick these days with trying to do it. I can't remember who I was talking to recently, and I was like, yeah, you can check all of this stuff, but people can say, like you said, my mother give you a different name and number, and you call and they give you a glowing reference. And then sometimes landlords, they're just so happy to get rid of you. They're like,
Yeah,
I'll give you whatever. You won't just go.
yeah. I've been looking through my paper while I'm talking to them. They're like, "Oh, they're a great tenant. What about this eviction that was filed last year? Tell me about that."
Right.
Yeah, tell me about that. And
So
so,
you've done your research, so you're able to do it. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, and I could go on forever, but ADUs as another affordable housing and opportunity. Tell me how you got started with ADUs, because I know we went to tour one that day. And what do you recommend as far as like taking advantage of those?
well, my experience with the ADU started again back in maybe around 2020. I was interested in doing ADUs because I started to look around. Back then, the real estate market was crazy. I'm sure you know there was due diligence that was so high, earnest money you had to come up with, multiple offers, and it was just chaotic.
Let's
And
back up. What's an ADU? Because I've just said the
oh,
acronym, but let's tell us what an ADU is.
an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. That's when you have more than one house on the same lot.
Okay.
And this was not even allowed when I first became interested in it around 2017. It wasn't even allowed in the city of Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until later that the city council passed a law that said that we actually could do ADUs. And I kept in good communication with my city councilman at that time, Corey. I used to call and say, "Hey, is it approved yet? Is it approved yet?" Soon it was approved. I already had my plans together. But initially, when I was first interested in it, it was not allowed. But when the city council said that we could do it, it came at the perfect time because in 2020, I had decided that I was going to increase my investment portfolio. And the way that I was going to do that was just buy more properties. But the market was so much different and so much more expensive than when I first started. My first property was $50,000, and the next property was 75, and the next one was a little bit more than that. But now we're talking about the average home price in the Raleigh area in 2020 being like $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, Lord, I know, because I pray and I journal, and I know what I heard, that I'm supposed to go ahead and advance my portfolio and increase the portfolio. But I said, how? $300,000. I can't. I'm not going to move again. I'm finished with the house hacking perspective of my life. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that. So I prayed about it. I journaled about it, and I said, okay, how am I going to do this? And didn't have an answer initially. Because 20% of 300 some thousand is not something that I just got, if I have it, I don't want to spend it on that.
Right.
And so one night I woke up early in the morning and I kept hearing, look again, look again. And I said, what do you mean, look again? And so I didn't know initially, no, what does that mean? So I got up and I came here to my office and I said, look again. I bought my portfolio of property. I was looking through it and I saw one of the properties. I said, oh, wait a minute. Look at what I already have available to me. That's what you're saying. I was trying to talk. I talked to the Lord all day. And that's the conversation I was having. I saw a property that it was on a little under a quarter acre in the city of Raleigh, close to downtown, and it had a little shed in the back. And I looked at the property. I said, oh my goodness, I can put a little house behind this house, and it's right on the corner, so I could cut a driveway here. Immediately I had a plan in my head as far as what I wanted to do with that house. I looked at the portfolio, and that is the house that I needed to work with, that piece of land. So, make a long story short, there was not a there was no guidance at that time when they first passed the ordinance, the rule that you could actually build an ADU. There was no guidance at all. So I was one of the first people in the city to do it, and so I had to kind of figure out what the steps were. I made mistakes. There were issues along the way, but finally I got it built, and it was one of the best investments I have ever made. It was way less than half of the price of the houses that are selling in Raleigh. You can't even buy a condo for what I paid for, to build that ADU. And I was able to rent it, and the person has been there. They have been absolutely excellent tenants. And it was just one of the best things that I could have ever done. Also, the problem initially was that people didn't want to finance the ADU.
I was going to ask you about financing.
It's myself, which is no problem because I had so much equity in the other house. And so I just went and you could do a, HELOC or a home equity loan, just pull off the equity and build the house. And so that was available, and it was absolutely one of the best decisions I ever made, was just to utilize what I have. So when you said, look again, looked at the portfolio, saw the land that was available. It wasn't in a subdivision. It was, the zoning was perfect for it. The location was perfect for it. And, so I just went for it. It was a huge, huge risk. Never done it before. Never built even a dog house before. Never built a tree house or anything. So building this house, it was big for me. And so that's how I got into building the ADU.
So did you have a builder? Did you get a floor plan? You have an architect? How does that process work? And then do you hook onto the electricity and utilities? What's the process?
So the initial thing was to get a survey of the property done. A lot of people get a survey done whenever they close on the house. But this particular property, I didn't get a survey done. So I got a survey of the whole lot, and I had them to stake out where would be an ideal place for the ADU. There are setback requirements. It can't be so close to the other house. It can't be so far from the backyard. It can't be so far from the front. The frontage has to be so much. So I had them stake out the exact little build box that I could build a house in. And then according to that, I said, okay, well, I could fit a house that's about 600 square feet on this lot. Then based on that square footage, I said, okay, what are my must-haves in this house? What do I want in this house? I did not like a lot of the floor plans that I saw online because they had a loft, and it just isn't that. I understand what they're doing. They're trying to go up and make as much space as they can. But I started thinking, number one, this right now is for a cash flow investment. Okay. It's for an investment property, but eventually I may have an elderly relative that may need to stay there. I may have and it may need to be handicap accessible for that that relative. I may have my son or grandchildren or whoever may need to live there. And eventually one day, I was talking to my husband, we may live there one day. And when we start traveling in our older days, we don't know what, but I do know that one level was going to be mandatory. So I did a lot of those floor plans that had everything on one level, a good use of the space. And so in my head, I designed my own little floor plan, and I found one on Etsy that kind of matched the floor plan in my head. And I took it to an architect in Raleigh, because if you find a floor plan online, it still has to meet the North Carolina code. And so I got a North Carolina architect a local architect to kind of, I can't draw with the darn, but I sketched out what I wanted versus what was on Etsy. In between those two, I came up with a floor plan for the property. And I also wanted to make sure that not only was everything all on one level, but I wanted to be on separate utilities as well. Because I had another tenant in the property on that I wasn't going to allow him to pay the utilities for this separate property. So I completely had to do the water and the electric. I made sure that this property didn't have any gas. It's only water and electric. I made sure it was energy efficient. All the windows were energy efficient, so their utility bill would not be that much at all. So it's ideal for just one person or two people living in the property, because utility bills were very limited. It's only about 590 square feet. So, and they have full size appliances, stainless steel. I put in granite countertops as well as porcelain in the bathroom. So I gave them all of the luxuries that they could need in that property. LVP throughout the entire house except the bathroom where it has porcelain tiles. But I made sure that it was up to speed. The bedroom is a large bedroom, is about a 12 by 12. And so as long as
12 by 12?
yeah,
Wow.
it was a big bedroom. It was a large bedroom. It's bigger than that bedrooms that are in the average house now. It's only a one bedroom bath, but it still has a living room, a kitchen, a little dining space, washer dryer connections, things that I would want if I were to age in place. If I were to be an older person or a single person, I would want all those things in there. So we designed it that way.
Right.
And you can put yourself if you're not going to rent it out. Say you have a parent that you're going to move into an ADU behind your house. I believe you can do it to yourself, be your own contractor up to 40,000. But after 40,000, you would need to hire a actual contractor, and that's what we did, hire a contractor. And we, had our ups and downs there. It was a little bumpy. I tell you, that's the hardest part of the thing is working through those issues, but it always is,
So did your current tenant say, well, I want my yard, why are you putting another house in my yard? Or were they okay?
Well, that is always tenant communication and treating, I love that tenant has been there over 10 years. One of my best tenants. And so it was a difficult decision to say, hey, I'm going to need this part of the backyard. But it was almost a quarter acre. So he had plenty of front yard and side yard. And also it was a way for me to keep his rent lower because I was getting rent from that property in the back. So I would rent still to this day is way under market value. It was one of the concessions, as well as another concession I made to keep him happy, to give him another storage unit to keep his lawn equipment, because in that little shed, he had his lawn equipment. So he says, what about my lawn equipment? Okay, I got another smaller storage to put his lawn equipment in. So there were some concessions that were made to make sure it was fair, but his rent is way below market rent because I did take a part of his yard to do it, and the part of the backyard to do it. So yeah, his concession had already been made, and he was happy, and he loves the new tenant. They take care of each other. They look out for each other. So
I love it. Great story.
And you don't have to cut through his yard to get to the ADU. That is a huge, huge factor that I considered whenever I purchased it. I made sure that the way that it was, and that's why I chose that property, because it's a corner house, and they're able to go have their own driveway directly up to the door of the ADU. She never has to go in his yard for anything.
Yeah. Love it. So I like that you said that you listened. You were asking why, and then you listen, because sometimes things come to us and we're like, we would just, ignore it or whatever. So, or be like, I can't do that. And I think back to when I bought my first house, and my dad was just like, you need to buy a house. And I was like, I can't buy a house, and listening and keep going. And then, yeah, I could. So not everybody always gets the opportunity to have somebody to say, or even hear, you can do this. So I like that you shared that, and you had an idea and a thought, and you journaled and you prayed and you talked and you listened. So
yeah, they said those who have ears, let them hear. So, but not everybody can hear. When you hear something and you keep hearing it, it's like, don't ignore it. What is the Lord trying to tell you? And there's always a way. There's always a way. I never thought. I never knew exactly how I was going to build out a real estate portfolio, especially as young as I was, but I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. Didn't know how exactly, but just keep chucking along, put one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, and eventually, 25 years will go by and you got what you need.
So how would someone get in touch with you if they're interested in you helping them become an investor and learning how to manage their own properties? But how do they get in touch with you?
You can reach me through, I have a Linktree account. So that's linktr.ee backslash P's and piano, HIONNE. So it's Linktree backslash Phionne is how you can reach me on Linktree, and all of my services are listed there. I do have services, as I said, for investors. If you need lease up, if you need inspection services, if you need help with your lease renewal, I offer those services, as well as I still do buyer and seller consultations to help them to buyers and sellers. But I am transitioning from full-time real estate brokerage to full-time investor. In 2020, just real quick, whenever I had got sick with COVID in 2020, and it revealed a lot of things. It revealed a lot of things. Number one, I wanted to make sure that I was not the money that I needed to pay for my basic expenses was never linked directly to my physical job or what I had to do, because I was out about probably about 4 weeks. And I said, you know what? I'm okay. I ain't missed a beat. So let me try another 4 weeks. And it has lasted to this day. I stopped pushing real estate, like my brokerage, and started buying more properties. Because I said, one day, if this COVID ever comes back or anything, I don't have to worry about that, because, the passive income will cover my expenses. So I learned that lesson during COVID. And also, that was the biggest lesson that I learned, is that you're not always going to be able to work to cover your basic expenses. So I went hard after 2020 with adding properties to the portfolio, so that if it ever come around again, or if I was ever in a situation again, that I wouldn't really have to worry about it. So they can reach me on Linktree, or they can give me a call at 919-637-1966. But I prefer that you go through Linktree to schedule the appointment if you need my assistance. But I do a lot of referrals now. I have a referral network all throughout North Carolina. So, not only North Carolina, wherever you are, a lot of times I have contacts in that location. I make it a point to build relationships with other realtors, especially when they move out of state. So a lot of my brokerage activities have moved to me doing consultations with people. I have a new program that I'm releasing where we're going to be doing home buyer prep. That means that you don't have to use me as your realtor. I'm going to prepare you, and when you're ready to shop, I can have plenty of agents that can assist with that. So I have agents right now that I refer people to that are out of the area. I have prepped the person. I have they've done the credit counseling, the financial counseling. My sister has a company called Economic Empowerment Circle. If their finances are all messed up and they need to start from the beginning, that's not my thing. I can help you get a house, and I have one of my credit counselors, a credit counselor that can help you with your credit. But if you are making $2,000 and spending $5,000, that's a basic financial education you need right there. Right. And so a lot of times we'll take them from that perspective and educate them, help them to create a budget and savings, all that type of thing, and help them get over general knowledge of how to control their finances. And then she hands them over to me, and then I can work with them to prepare them to go on to purchase a house. And like I said, they can use me. They don't have to use me. They can use whoever they want to. But the point is, they have been prepared for the current real estate environment and how to navigate it. And once I pass them over, the broker takes care of them. And, that's that. Some of my previous clients, I will always be their broker. That's one thing. I believe in loyalty. So if somebody who I sold a house to 10 years ago called me, I'm going to answer the phone. I'm going to help them whatever what they need me to. So my old clients, I still maintain a relationship with them. Call them, they call me, they email me, they text me, they still ask me for, repair requests. And then they still call and reach out to me. But as far as attracting new clientele, I'm not actively advertising that for the brokerage right now. Backstroking out of the industry is what I call it.
Damn, I love it. So one last thing, one piece of advice, it's called Make Your Move. And I always want to encourage everybody, not just in real estate, because I do believe that is the cornerstone and the basis for wealth building. But for anybody that's looking to get started, what would you tell them to do, so they can make your move?
Get educated. You do not have to have the money right now, but just know that if you have the knowledge and you know how to find and evaluate properties, even if you don't have the money, start learning how to evaluate properties and do it often. Do it often. Establish a criteria for what you want, because this is one thing that a lot of people don't understand. There are deals out there every single day. People think, oh, I need an off-market deal. No, you might not need an off-market deal. A lot of my deals I found right there on the MLS. Two people can be looking at the same house and not realize it's a deal. But if you have your criteria, you've studied the market, even before you have any money, if you've studied the market, you've gotten a buy box, you know what type of property type you want, you know the location you want, you know the price you're willing to pay. When a house hits the market that fits that criteria, you already know it's a deal. You could be looking at it, somebody else could be looking at it on the MLS, and you realize it's a deal and they don't. That has happened so many times because you have to know what a deal is, and that comes from experience. One of my favorite quotes from Jim Rohn is competence leads to confidence. So whenever you are competent in a certain area, you know how to evaluate the property. It's going to be nothing to make you move. It's going to be nothing to make that move. It's because you already know, you have studied the market. You know that it's a deal. You know that houses in this area usually sell for $250 and this one is listed for $175 because you watched that area. You looked at that area. You evaluated in that area. So get the knowledge, understand what a deal is, find your market, and just get in there. Don't hesitate to get in there after you feel confident with what you're doing. So I would say just don't wait. Don't wait.
So even in this crazy market we're in, just keep going, and it's a good time, right?
It's deals to be had in every market. As a matter of fact, this is a great time to buy. And as Warren Buffett says, buy when there's blood in the streets. I don't like that quote, but it is absolutely true, because a lot of times if you have saved your money or you have prepared your mind and you're ready and you have the education and the knowledge to jump, a lot of times when people are losing properties, and I don't like when people are losing properties, but that is a time to get in, because if there are foreclosures or people who need to sell their homes, you can jump in and you can buy homes at prices that things that you probably couldn't afford last year, or say you may be able to afford it now.
Right.
So it's never a wrong market. If the numbers work, they work. If they don't, they don't. It's harder to find cash flowing properties now, especially with the interest rates being so high. But that means you have to get creative. You may need to, instead of buying a duplex or a triplex or a quad where you're getting income from those other properties, you may need to buy a single family and put ADU into that after a couple of years. So you may have to plan differently and strategize differently, but you can still find a way to profit in any market, if you know what you're doing.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you answering the phone when I call and when I text and say, hey, do you have a house for this person? Because, I always try to, that networking that you talked about is really real. So getting to know people and what they have to offer.
You're my Facebook cousins. I have many of you.
Lovely. Well, I appreciate you again, and thank you so much. And I encourage everybody to make your move, because every step counts. Go out here and make it happen. Have a great day.
Having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.